Another day, another major misstep for Donald Trump, but this time it was his own shareholders who were getting the raw end of the deal. So if you've been on Twitter, you've had the misfortune of seeing that Donald Trump is back to tweeting, posting a barrage of the usual nonsense in advance of his big interview with Elon Musk. And that led to a more than 5% decline for Trump media, considering the only asset that its platform, Truth Social, has is that Trump himself posts from it. But now that apparently he's no longer exclusive to Truth Social and is back on Twitter, suddenly the already embattled social media site has even less appeal than it did before. And I say embattled because, well, the notion that Trump media is anything even close to resembling a legitimate company is a joke. Just days ago, it reported a quarterly loss of $16.4 million on $837,000 in revenue. All the while, it's purportedly valued at $8 billion. Right, if Trump media is worth $8 billion, then I play for the NBA and it's snowing today in Death Valley. Although, should we really be surprised that Trump has opted to screw over his own shareholders by no longer remaining exclusive to Truth Social? Should we really be surprised that Donald Trump would throw people who entrusted their livelihoods to him under the bus because he decided to help himself politically? I don't know how many times I need to repeat this, but Trump's priority is Trump. Think about all of the people he's discarded to help himself. He fired Ronna McDaniel as RNC chair, as if she was the reason that Republicans have been losing elections and not Donald Trump himself. He trashed his own former press secretary, Kayleigh McEnany, writing, "I don't need any advice from Rhino Kayleigh McEnany on Fox, just had a giant victory over a badly failing candidate, bird brain, and she's telling me what I can do better. Save your advice for Nikki." Trump said that Paul Manafort, his campaign chairman, came into the campaign very late and was with us for a short period of time. He called George Papadopoulos, his foreign policy advisor, a low-level volunteer. He said of Gordon Sondland, his EU ambassador and campaign donor, "I have not spoken to him much. He is not a man I know well." He said Michael Cohen, his own lawyer and fixer, did a, quote, tiny fraction of his legal work. Of Sidney Powell, he wrote, "Despite the fake news reports to the contrary, and without even reaching out to ask the Trump campaign, Ms. Powell was not my attorney and never was. In fact, she would have been conflicted." And the list goes on and on, but the point here is clear. Donald Trump will throw you under the bus the moment he feels you become politically inconvenient for him. And the only thing more embarrassing than being thrown under the bus by Donald Trump is the fact that any of these people sell their soul to him in the first place, thinking that somehow it won't eventually happen to them too. At some point, everyone will be discarded by Trump, even the people who are deluded into thinking that they, unlike everyone else, are special. And the same goes for the people who invest their money into him and his company. Let me not mince words. Trump does not care about you. He is not looking to help you. Everyone in Trump's life is there in service of him and not the other way around. There is no mutual benefit to getting into business with Donald Trump. You are there to provide something to him, and in return, you should expect nothing. Now, not everyone is upset over the update. Elon Musk is applauding the move, posting stuff like this onto Twitter. A woman whispering the words "Donald Trump is back on X," resulting in that person's hair standing on end, which, isn't exactly the reaction one would have unless you are a groveling sycophant planted firmly within the depths of Donald Trump's colon. To that end, I hope Elon's got some room in there to at least stretch out his legs. And in fact, for those looking for another silver lining here, Elon Musk's endorsement is effectively the political kiss of death. When he tweeted, "I voted for Mayra Flores, first time I ever voted Republican, massive red wave in 2022, there of course would be no massive red wave in 2022, when in fact Republicans didn't win the Senate and only won the House by a few seats. Or this one, Vivek did more meetings with voters than all other candidates combined, then I think he will do very well in the vote on Monday. The power of an extreme work ethic is usually underestimated." Yeah, Vivek literally dropped out immediately after the vote on Monday that Elon was referencing and endorsed Donald Trump. Or this one, "Los Angeles is fortunate to have someone like Rick Caruso running for mayor. He's awesome." Rick Caruso, of course, went on to lose to Karen Bass in Los Angeles. And finally, this one. "I supported Yang last time, but DeSantis has a better chance of winning." DeSantis would go on to lose handily to Donald Trump in the GOP primary, but not after handing Elon himself the reins of his rollout, and well, didn't exactly go as planned.
Do you remember that time that billionaire Elon Musk unveiled the new Tesla Cybertruck? And when he went to demonstrate the vehicle's supposedly bulletproof glass, they smashed two of its windows, even though they weren't supposed to break? Today's Twitter rollout of the Ron DeSantis campaign went kind of like that.
Now it's quiet. We want to welcome you to this historic Twitter Spaces event and more broadly a first in the history of social media. Tonight, I'm pleased to introduce two individuals who've done more to loosen the grip. Sorry about that. We've got so many people here. So let's see.
they just keep crashing, huh?
Well, it's certainly an incredible honor to have Governor DeSantis make this stark announcement.
Yo, it was like 20 minutes of that. Trump had the golden escalator. Ron DeSantis got the world's most embarrassing 404 error. Over 20 minutes of technical difficulties that sounded like this. That is how the Florida governor's big entrance in the Republican presidential primary will be forever remembered. DeSantis chose to launch his campaign not during a campaign rally, not on a televised event, but on Twitter.com with Elon Musk. And why? Maybe because Musk and Twitter are the best audience for the DeSantis brand crusade against woke.
And so, clearly, after watching Elon bungle DeSantis' rollout in a campaign that never managed to regain its footing from there, Trump has decided that he, too, would entrust a flailing campaign to Elon Musk, the guy who's literally never made a correct political prediction in his life and who seems to exclusively destroy campaigns. No notes, Donald. No notes. As for why Trump decided to do this in the first place, it's obvious. The guy is panicking. He sees his steady descent in the polls, and he's frantically looking for any avenue to regain the spotlight. And so he figures that he'll glom onto Elon and his Twitter audience, thinking wrongly that more Trump will somehow help him. And that's his fatal flaw. That's his hubris at play. What Trump doesn't realize is that more Trump doesn't help Trump, more Trump hurts Trump. The more he reminds Americans of who he is and the chaos that surrounds him, the worse off he is.
The people of January 6th were treated very unfairly, and they were there to complain, not through me, they were there to complain about an election. And, you know, it's very interesting. The biggest crowd I've ever spoken to, and I said peacefully and patriotically, which nobody wants to say, but I said peacefully and patriotically. The biggest crowd I've ever spoken to, and you've seen, Maggie, I was at the mall, I was at the Washington Monument, I was at the whole thing. I had crowds, I don't know who's ever had a bigger crowd than I have, but I had it many times. The biggest crowd I've ever spoken before was that day, and I'll tell you, it's very hard to find a picture of that crowd. You see the picture of a small number of people relatively going to the Capitol, but you never see the picture of the crowd. The biggest crowd I've ever spoken, I've spoken to the biggest crowds. Nobody's spoken to crowds bigger than me. If you look at Martin Luther King, when he did his speech, his great speech, and you look at ours, same real estate, same everything, same number of people, if not, we had more. And they said he had 1 million people, but I had 25,000 people. But when you look at the exact same picture, and everything's the same because it was the fountains, the whole thing, all the way back to from Lincoln to Washington, and you look at it, and you look at the picture of his crowd, my crowd, we actually had more people. I've known her a long time indirectly, not directly very much, and she was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black.
Does that seem like a guy who should be doing more or fewer press conferences? If you ask me, it's probably the latter. But because Trump loves himself more than any human could comprehend loving anything, he thinks that those things are a success just by virtue of the fact that he got attention from them. He thinks bragging about his insurrection crowd makes him look good. He thinks denying Kamala Harris's ethnicity makes him look good. He thinks that so long as words are coming out of his mouth and that he is breathing, he looks good. But he doesn't. He's only further hurting himself and clearly hurting the people who are foolish enough to invest their money into him. I've got a really exciting announcement. I've written a book. It's called Shameless. This book explores how Republicans have exploited their historical branding while attacking our democracy, how the media has proven itself a willful participant, and how Democrats can learn from this to rebalance the political scales and save our democracy. It has been a lifelong dream of mine to write my own book, and so I'd like to ask you to pre-order it by clicking the link right here on the screen. And if you buy within this pre-order period, your book is going to come with a signed nameplate. As you know, I've never had a single sponsor on my channel. I don't ask for money or anything like that, but if you're looking for a way to support me, this is hands down the best way to do it. So again, follow the link right here on the screen, and thank you from the bottom of my heart for pre-ordering Shameless. And as always, make sure to subscribe to see more of my content.